Right, so the Torygraph and their tax burden calculator for how much disabled people cost you. It's a pretty offensive tool, isn't it? Why are we paying for these useless, feckless people just because they got born with something wrong with them or were involved in a terrible accident? That's their fault. That's the message coming from them, really, isn't it? It was a message straight out of 1930s Germany, too, as the Nazis made posters touting the same vile narratives and eliminated almost 250,000 useless eaters as a cost-saving exercise. Eugenics, and when the Torygraph fixates on this welfare spend figure, ignoring other government spending, it is guilty of promoting that same kind of thinking. Why does your calculator only cover welfare spending and not say defence spending or fraud? The tax burden, as they call it, horrible phrase, implying taxation is some awful thing instead of being the main mechanism in place to control inflation. And with inflation running away at the moment, way too high, blighting all of our lives right now, a bit more taxation would be welcome, especially from those avoiding or evading paying it entirely. That tax has to come from the right places and be put on the right people. But the Torygraph is the Tory mantra paper, and lower tax is pretty much all they bleat about these days. The Torygraph's horrible little calculator isn't just nasty naziesque propaganda, it's also completely dishonest. I had a play with it, though. I looked up the average UK wage, which is just shy of £28,000 currently. Quite a bit, you'd think, for a lot of us. It's pulled up by the very wealthy, of course. That skews the figure, but we'll use it anyway. And on that £28,000 figure, I'd pay £4,938 in tax, of which 31%, some £1,549, would be spent on welfare. What the Torygraph have done, however, in order to ramp that figure upwards to 31% of your taxes, getting you frothing at the mouths and balling your fists up at all these workshy loafers are taking from you, is to include pensions in their figure as well. Pension costs actually taking up most of that 31% figure the Torygraph have used, because if you take pensions out, let's face it, pensioners probably make up most of the Torygraph's audience, welfare spending actually only equates to some 13% of government spending. According to ukpublicspending.co.uk, in the year 2022, total spending was £1,058 billion. Over the same period, tax receipts taken were £1,017 billion, so slightly down on spending, but broadly not far off from each other, as needs to be the case to keep inflation under control. Tax taken controls inflation after the government printed billions to pay for the stuff to run the country with, and also waste, as they also tend to do. £1,058 billion printed to be spent by government, £1,017 billion taken to control inflation rising. You can see why tax taken dictates government spending, though, can't you? And when they cut taxes, equally they have to cut spending too to keep inflation under control. It's all the big Tory gone. Now, you might well complain about your taxes already being too high, that you need them cut. And thus we shall look at what our Torygraph ought to be looking at instead, which is tax avoidance and evasion, the tax that hasn't been paid. Now, the last figures I've been able to find today date from 2020 to 2021, but given this is just an illustration, these figures will do. And the amount of tax lost to tax avoidance and evasion that year was £35 billion. Half apparently lost to fraud. This was during the pandemic, of course, so bear that in mind. Although also bear in mind that a news report today stated that under Sunak's watch, government fraud has quadrupled. So this figure in actuality might well be significantly higher. Anyway, as a proportion of the tax taken, therefore, the tax the likes of you and I have paid that the government received that year, this amounts to 3.5% of the tax taken. So your taxes are 3.5% higher than they ought to be if tax avoiders stopped avoiding it and paid up their fair share. Well, 13% of my tax, according to the Torygraph, goes to welfare then, Damo, so it outweighs this avoidance figure. But hold on there. Your taxation, as I've said numerous times, repeatedly, and again here, doesn't pay for anything. It allows the government to create money to spend on stuff like welfare, but also everything else, not least things like Dido Harding's lost test and trace money and Boris Johnson's legal fees. Perhaps you prefer to pay for them, but I somehow doubt it. Your tax doesn't pay for that. It simply controls inflation. However, your tax will go up to make up for people not paying tax themselves. If they aren't paying, you have to make up the shortfall for government spending through your taxes. It's like car insurance. Your premiums go up for every driver not insured, don't they? Your tax goes up for every person not paying theirs too. It's the same example. So whilst the Torygraph tries to make you angry at disabled people for apparently costing you a fortune, whilst falsely amplifying that figure by lumping in the state pension with it, a benefit as it is, though people don't see it as such. Spare a thought for the proprietor of that hateful rag, Sir Frederick Berkeley, who lives in tax havens from a private island in the Channel Islands to Monaco. After a fallout with his late brother David, the other Berkeley brother, Fred relocated back to the UK. But to continue avoiding paying tax, he transferred his wealth through a series of trusts to his daughter. During his later divorce proceedings, his wife later said Frederick Berkeley isn't even allowed to have a basic bank account here in the UK because he's not allowed to have assets, all so he can avoid paying tax in the UK. So in short, ignore the nastiness of a hateful rag trying to convince you that disabled people are pinching money from your wallet, when the reality is it's the guy who owns the paper you're reading that's really the one doing it. He's far from the only press baron doing so either, and after you've liked, shared and subscribed to the channel, having got to the end of this video, hopefully it has therefore appealed to you, please do check out hundreds of other videos like this recommendation here, where another press baron recently came unstuck as well, and deservedly so at that. And I'll catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.